Welcome back to the Get Loved Up podcast, your number one resource for inspiration and motivation to live your purpose, make healthy living a priority, and thrive doing what you love. I'm your host, Koya Webb, a small town girl who chased her dreams and caught them, a former track and field athlete who healed using spirituality and yoga, and an entrepreneur who didn't let sexual assault, racism, and insecurities dim her light. And now it's your turn to allow these episodes with some of the top voices in spirituality, wellness, and entrepreneurship to inspire you to thrive. Let's get loved up together. Jenna Kutcher is a born and raised Minnesota wife, mother, and entrepreneur who aims for two things daily: helping others wake up to life and staying in comfy pants. Creator and host of the top-rated Gold Digger podcast, she's helped thousands redefine success and chase bold dreams through her decade-long work as a leading online personality and educator. Jenna!
Hi, Koya. Thank you so much. I feel so honored that this is the podcast I get to be on. Thank you for having me.
I'm so glad you're here because I want to talk all things. How are we really? How are we really? I
know. I was just going to ask you, how are you? And then I'm like, oh, this is a nuanced conversation that needs to happen once record is hit. So we just get to do that together and everyone gets to listen.
I agree. I totally agree. And that's why one thing that I just said before is that we think alike so much. And I was literally like, we just need to spill it on how we are really. And you literally just said, I'm like, you could have took the words. I don't know how you do it, but you're good at it. So, but you first, how are you really?
Oh, well, I'm laughing so hard because my husband just texted me that he got our 3-year-old down for a nap. And he said, she picked a booger and wanted to go to sleep with it. That's how we're doing today. And I am dying laughing. So I'm like, that is so my child. I am so good. I am feeling energized. The sun is shining, which it has not shown as much as normal in Minnesota. And I feel full in a good way, as in just like the fullness and the breadth of this crazy life. It's a lot and it's enough at the same time. What about you?
Oh, I love that. I love that. I'm feeling all the things. I feel like I've felt all of the emotions in the last 2 weeks. I just moved from LA to Atlanta and I drove my Tesla from LA and Atlanta. The move, the packing, the people, the overcharging for pretty much everything under the sun because everyone knows you're moving. And right before that, like I got, touched inappropriately by a massage therapist that I had to deal with, which I had no more emotional capacity to deal with. And then I had like people in my job that transitioned, and girl, so I've experienced all the emotions in the last month, but I will have to say that today, and I am not just saying that because it's today was the first day that I woke up and I felt like I was back towards 100% because I have been so drained emotionally, physically. Like my spirit is the only thing that keeps me alive and going, is my spirit of love and compassion and wanting to live out my purpose. But my body and my mind has been like, look, girl, you better lay us down. You better get us some rest and some sleep and some Epsom salt bath and some massages, else we gonna check out on you.
Yes. Oh my gosh. I feel like your service engine soon light is on. And if you don't pay attention, we're going to have a high bill and we're going to need a new radiator real quick.
Exactly. And I love, I really love talking to you because I feel like you really, you do care. You really care. And I feel like, when I'm having conversations with people, and your book really helped me deep dive on this. Why do we tell people, oh, we're good, we're okay? And one thing you touched on is because people really want to hear it. What has been your experience in really asking person how they're doing and your reply and what you're really ready to hold space for.
Yeah. Well, I think that's for so long, we've gotten in the habit of fast conversation. I mean, our culture is obsessed with efficiency, right? Like, we're like, how can we do things faster, better? How can we do more? And in that, our ability to conversate specifically too, when we think about these last few years where a lot of people have literally been in survival mode. We can barely carry our own answers to the questions, let alone shoulder the potential burden of someone else's answers. And so I do think that part of that should be noted, that like the cultural and the culture and the context that we've been in has kind of broken our ability to people. And, we kind of joke about that nowadays. Like, I'm learning how to be around people again. I'm learning how to hold conversation again. And I know for me, like an example of kind of what you're talking about is in our quest to grow our family, we experienced 2 losses. And when I was pregnant with my first daughter, Coco, who was my 3rd pregnancy, people would always say, "Oh, is she your first? Or is this your first?" And I would always catch myself and be like, okay, do I want to go into it and tell the whole story? Or should I just say like, yeah, she's my first? And I think that's how we've gotten to be with even just answering the question, how are you? Right? It's like, do I want to go there? Is that person ready to go there with me? Or should we just kind of brush it under and like good and busy and let that be the response? And I think that what you brought up, even when we just jumped in, is you have to feel safe and invited to really give the answer.
That's so important. And I want to go a little bit deeper on that, because I know that a lot of people listening, like I want to say 40% of our community are moms, and have experienced different levels of complications when it comes to, family. And do you mind sharing with us like about Coco being your first or not, and what you experienced before Coco, just to support moms who are going through the same thing?
Yeah. And here's a trigger warning for anyone in terms of miscarriage, just because I think that for so many people, it's a journey of healing that is a long, like forthcoming one. For me, I know that it's been so interesting. So for 5 years, my husband and I, we were married. We were married very young, right out of college, like many Midwesterners do. And the word never was the word that we used when we were talking about growing our family. We just said never. We love being the 2 of us. We love the freedom. We love the time. We're building this life, just us. And something really shifted in my heart. And it was very surprising to me because I loved children, but I just didn't hold a vision of me as a mom, which is probably really interesting in the sense of like, I love being a mom now. It's a huge part of who I am. And once we kind of flipped the script where it's like, wow, we've spent so many years and so many dollars and so much time trying to avoid this thing. And all of a sudden now we want it. We were really surprised to encounter kind of the path that we went down. And so I was pregnant the first time, and we went in for that first ultrasound and heard the words, "There is no heartbeat." And it was really fascinating because I had this deep inner knowing of like, if something goes wrong, I want to talk about it, because I just knew so many people had been through this. And I think early on, I knew that like the path to starting your family is not always paved well, right? Mm-hmm. And so I shared about it, and I felt like, this was the reason. The reason I had to endure this loss was that I was, made to be a messenger to just bring more knowledge to miscarriage. And so I was so excited for my redemption song, which would be the second pregnancy. And when we walked the same exact path as the first with another loss, that was 10 weeks in, same situation, had to have surgery, like all of these things happening again, history repeating itself. I was so angry. Like they say there are the stages of grief. Like I skipped denial and went straight to anger because I was like, God, this was supposed to be like the redemption song. This was supposed to be like this rising of like, look at, I went through this loss and here I have come out on the other side. And when we went through it a second time, I was just so angry and so sad. I learned so much about grief. And I think a lot of times we try to overcome grief. And what we forget is that like sometimes we just have to pick up the grief and start moving with it and building those muscles, because you don't leave grief behind. I still think about those 2 pregnancies every single day. The fact that I have 2 healthy daughters never replaced those losses. And I think that that's something that we get wrong about loss, is that we can hide it or move on from it. You don't move on from it, you move with it. And when I was finally pregnant with my daughter, Coco, so it was a 3-year journey from when we started trying to grow our family to when we finally got to hold a wiggly little squishy baby in our arms. I just learned a lot about empathy in so many parts around motherhood, the choice to not become a mom. Sometimes people don't have that choice. Sometimes the decision is made for them from their body or, their situation, their relationships. And so I just have so much empathy for women with the pressures that are put on them around the notion and the idea of motherhood. And then when you become a mom, there's so many more things that you encounter that you just never knew. It's like, we don't know what we don't know.
Thank you so much for sharing that. Thank you for the warning, and thank you for going there, because I feel like a lot of times we don't know how to share, and we also don't know how to hold space for each other. And that's why that how are you, or even how are you really question becomes so nuanced, right? Because we, like you said, you're nervous about, is someone going to be ready for what I have to share? And I love that you went into it, because I feel like this is a time, especially things are still, in uncertain, right? And this is a time we have an opportunity to have those deeper conversations and build deeper relationships. I feel like the thing that I've done during the last 2 years is build deeper relationships. What are your thoughts about building relationships during this time, and how has your vulnerability, sharing more with those people you have felt safe with, really helped you connect?
Yeah. It's so fascinating, Koya, because you and I connected kind of towards the beginning of the world changing. And, what does that look like? And I think that women are walking around these days feeling like something is wrong with them because they don't have this sort of community around them that maybe they see presented in the media or on Instagram. We think that everyone has these deep, deep friendships and relationships, and there must be something wrong with me because maybe I'm feeling lonely or I'm surrounded by people, but nobody knows who I really am or what I stand for. And there is this lack of depth. And I don't know, do you feel this way in terms of our generation really struggles in understanding like the quality over quantity statement when it comes to relationships, but we also struggle in how to like energetically connect and support with people. Do you agree with that?
Yeah, I do. And I feel like for me, it stems from childhood and really just not having that mirrored. I don't know what it stems from for you.
Yeah. I mean, I think that what's so interesting, and for me, a lot of it too points to entrepreneurship, is it's a lonely journey. And when you are embarking on entrepreneurship and you don't have entrepreneurial friends around you, people just don't get the challenges, right? But we often draw lines in the sand and say, well, people just aren't going to understand it, instead of helping bridge the gap and say, let me help you understand what this is like, or what this feels like, or what I'm struggling with. And for me, I started a simple practice years ago. So I would drive to a CrossFit gym. I no longer do this, but I do the practice. And every morning on my 15-minute drive, I would think of and hold space for or pray for 3 of my friends. And it would be like the most random people ever. Like it could be like that one girl from your physics class in freshman year. But what I would do is I would just sit with that thought, or think of them, or send them love, or say a prayer over them. And then I would reach out and just send a voice note. And I have loved voice notes. Like if you are my friend, you will get a voice note. You get voice notes, you get long ones.
Yes.
And I would just say, hey, there's no need to respond. I just want you to know I'm thinking of you today. Or you popped into my brain because I saw that funny commercial we used to laugh at, or I was eating this hot sauce. And remember that time we were at Taco Bell? And I would just reach out to people and just say, I just want you to know I'm thinking of you today. And I've done that every single day for years. And sometimes it's to the same people. Sometimes it's to random people that have popped into my brain. And what I found is that a lot of times it's like divine messaging, like where someone's like, oh, I needed that. Or, oh my gosh, like you don't know how much I needed that. And I used to ignore those prompts. I feel like I used to just be like, oh, that's so weird that I was thinking about Lindsay today. And now I'm like, oh, I think I need to like intercede and just send some love over to Lindsay. Maybe something's going on. And so when I think about relationships, I think one beautiful thing that COVID bridged the gap on is all of a sudden I was doing like Zoom calls with my college roommates who maybe we hadn't gotten into the same space in years, but we were sharing a virtual room. And it kind of reminded us that there are different ways to connect beyond double tapping or feeling like we know what's going on inside someone's life versus what's in reality. And for me, one of my greatest frustrations in being an online personality or having a brand online is a lot of times people watch what you're doing online and they assume that's it, right? Right. But people like you and I, we share like 2% of our lives online and we live 98% of our lives offline. And I want my life offline to be far richer and more beautiful than the life I'm presenting online. And so if people are taking that online glimpse and saying, well, that must be what she's up to, man, you're missing out on the good stuff. And so I've learned to just really lean into that fact alone and to just say, no need to respond. Just want you to know I'm thinking of you. I'm here for you. And then maybe ask a question. I texted one of our mutual friends, Lisa Billieu, this morning, and I said, on a scale of 1 to 10, 1 being awful, 10 being amazing, where are you at and how can I be there for you today? And letting people respond with where they're at, because I think a lot of times we enter conversations with these preconceived ideas of how somebody is, and we don't open the door for how are you really?
Oh, I love that. I'm borrowing that from you.
Yes.
Like on the scale of 1 to 10. And we both do the check-in, the lifestyle check-ins. I mean, we're both like, every month, I think you should check in different parts of life, business, personal, like where are you and how are you doing on a scale of 1 to 10? But I haven't done that in text. And I think that is so good, especially when you know a friend is going through something and you want to know how to support them. And a lot of times, you know, they're going to say, I'm good, but just getting that scale, I think that's an extra way to sneakily get a reply for them that's more real. I love that.
Yeah. And I think, what really made me think of doing that more so is when I was in my postpartum phase with my second daughter, Quinn, recently, people would some people would be like, oh, you must be so tired. And like, really, I was like feeling energized. Like, I'm so grateful I have a healthy girl. Or people would be like, oh, you must be in bliss. And maybe my life was feeling chaotic in the moment. And it was like those projections of how I should be feeling could make me feel guilt for not feeling that way. And so instead, it's like when you approach it and just say like, hey, like, do you need encouragement today? Or do you need someone to commiserate with you? Like, I'll meet you where you're at versus trying to assume or project how I think you're doing. It can totally change the way that you conversate, and it can really give depth. You actually recently did this with me where you and I were accountability partners in a program together, and you were like, hey, I just want to check in. How are you doing? And it left space to be like, okay, I'm doing really good on this, but I'm really failing at this. And it would have been totally different if you were like, hey, aren't you rocking this thing? Because it's like, you don't know where somebody is unless you really give them the space to answer that question honestly.
I agree with that 110%. I call it empathetic questioning because you're really allowing them. And I am like, a lot of times not happy with like, you're great, right? I know you're doing good, but I know you're busy, but like, those are like and I know people do it to be kind and I know there's good intentions behind it.
Totally.
it doesn't, like you said, it doesn't lead to a realistic answer because you're just like, okay, well, I hate to bust your bubble, but actually,
here's where I'm really at.
Here's where I'm really at. But no, actually, like after reading your book, like I've committed to, you know, and I had already made a commitment during the pandemic to just connect more, build relationships, and have those relationships be more authentic. But I feel like since like diving into your book, really not always giving people like the, you know, A to Z, but giving them a little bit and seeing what they can handle of my life, especially as I'm moving and I'm building new friendships. It's like, okay, when you start telling people a little bit, do they zone off? Do they even acknowledge anything that you said? And I feel like that's a good way to not just assume people can't handle what you have to give, but maybe just share a little bit, because I feel like we're not here alone. And what do you feel about just kind of, how do you know if a person can really take how you're doing really?
Yeah. Well, I always think about this example of my grandparents. So my grandpa is 93, and I used to not even try to explain my work to him because I just assumed like his scope of reality, understanding podcasting or blogging, like he's never going to get it. Right. And so I would always just kind of belittle my life's work and be like, you know, I'm on the internet and, you know, I'm doing these things. And I realized like, one, I'm doing a disservice to his intelligence. Like he is smart enough to figure this out. But two, I'm not even really giving him an invitation to honor or understand my work. And so I challenged myself, like, how can I describe this in a way that he would understand? And they go to a Lutheran church. And I was like, okay, so my podcast is almost like a sermon where I bring up a marketing strategy or a tip or something. And I round it out and give people like actionable advice that they can use in their lives. And he was like, oh, okay. And I feel like we do this a lot in conversation where it's almost like we assume like, well, somebody can't handle this or they don't understand this, so I'm not even going to go there. But what I think happens then is it's almost like we're shoving ourselves into these like containers of like, I can be this Koya when I'm here, but I need to be this Koya when I'm here. And this person is only going to know this part of me. And it's like we're walking around in our lives as like half people. Like we're not even aware of like how we can integrate all of the pieces of who we are and walk through life as like a whole being. And I think one of the things that's super fascinating about the era that we find ourselves in, especially coming out of COVID, is, you know, a lot of people, if they were fortunate and privileged enough to do so, had to work from home, parent from home, be in relationship at home, cook at home, you know, order groceries into home. Everything was happening in one space. And we were no longer able to compartmentalize all the different facets of who we are. And I think that was a big awakening for a lot of people where they were like, you know, I'm one person at work and I'm one person at home and I'm one person in relationship. Who am I really? And I think that was a really fascinating thing. And so when we look at conversations, I think, you know, the old adage of like, when you assume you make an ass out of you and me, don't assume that someone cannot hold or understand something, but think about how you can communicate in a way that invites them to have empathy, to understand at a deeper level. My friend Tico Nejan, she's an incredible emotional intelligence expert, and she would always say, the goal is not to have somebody walk a mile in your shoes. Like your shoes are your shoes. They're not meant to fit there, but you want to help them visualize what each step of that mile feels like in their own shoes. And it's your job as a human to help come to them in a way that they can understand and relate. And I think that's such a beautiful reminder when it comes to empathy, and also just to not assume that someone can't carry that burden with you.
I love that. And I love the way you explained it to your grandpa too. Yeah. I mean, because I'm from the South, and a lot of things that I do, it, you know, doesn't necessarily resonate with many people in my family. My brother, he can take a little bit more of it than other people, but I have learned to, you know, even my lifestyle, being a vegan for 17 years, you know, I learned, okay, no one wants to talk about that. So I've learned to talk about things in a way, introduce things in a way that I feel like people would be open to. And sometimes they are, and sometimes they aren't. And I think that's just a beautiful, compassionate way to not, like you said, assume that people are not going to get it, or people are not going to want to get it, or people are not going to at least get some of it. So that's so beautiful. Yeah. And that kind of leads me to my next question. A lot of people right now are just like, they are not doing okay, and they're burnt out, and they're just like, I don't even know what I want to do. I had a friend of mine just saying, you know, they're incredibly successful, over 7-figure income earner, great business, great person, lots of friends. And they're just like, I just feel depressed. I don't even know if I want to do this anymore. And what is your, you know, working with so many entrepreneurs yourself, like, what is your response to a person who is in this place of like, seemingly on the outside, they have everything, but they're really not feeling well. And they're just like, I just don't know. I feel like I've done it all. And I feel like I don't even know what I want to do now.
Yeah. In my book, I talk about how I was climbing ladders, like corporate ladders. And I had this like huge awakening one day when my boss sat down and she basically told me my 5-year plan. Didn't ask me like, what do you want? What are you excited about? What do you envision? It was like, here is your plan for your life. And I was like, this is not what I want. And I think what happens, especially for entrepreneurs, is we start climbing other ladders that are created by society, ladders that are created usually by men, usually white men who are very wealthy, but ladders nonetheless where we are being told this is what success is. And we stop saying, what do I want success to feel like? How does success feel? And we start chasing, what does it look like? And I think it's a trap that a lot of us fall down that leads us to burnout. And if we're lucky, the burnout leads to breakthrough. But a lot of times when we find ourselves feeling burnt out like your friend is, I think it's that we have achieved something and it doesn't feel like we thought it would or should. And that's where we're like, that thing I was chasing, that wasn't it. That wasn't it. And I think what's beautiful is that we get to wake up and keep doing that and keep figuring it out until we can figure out what success feels like. So nowadays, I'm like, I don't care what success looks like to somebody. I want to know what it would feel like. Like, what does it feel like to wake up and be excited about the work you're going to do? What does it feel like to be in alignment? Like you talk about alignment so much. Like, what does it feel like to feel fully aligned with what you're saying and how you're living? What does it feel like to be present to the moments? Like, what does it feel like to wake up to your life? And for me, one of the biggest things that I realized is that a lot of times the things that look shiny, like the things that are presented to us as like, oh, this is a big break or this is your huge opportunity, they're not actually shiny. They're very dull. And when you've experienced that a few different times, you start to say like, I'm not going to wait for my big break to come. I'm going to make my own big breaks happen. That's where things absolutely transform. And one of the things that I found a lot when speaking to females, especially female entrepreneurs over these last 2 years, is that we have this massive fear around losing momentum. And what that tells me is that we don't trust ourselves enough to realize that what has gotten us this far is going to carry us forward. Momentum is a beautiful thing, but it can also be a myth that keeps us at that chaotic, busy pace. And it's really when we come back to like come home to ourselves and trust like what has gotten me this far is going to carry me forward, and I can hit the brake pedal and trust that I know how to press the gas again. That is where everything changes. And that's where that belief within ourselves and what we're capable of really helps us climb the right ladder, the ladder that is only defined by ourselves.
Oh, I love that you said that, because I'm going through that season right now.
Yes, you are.
First part of the year, it's just like, you're going to pause,
Yeah.
You're going to go through this move. You're still going through all these other things, but you're just going to go through it and you're just going to feel it. And it's like, you're not stopping completely, but you're on a little coast. You're on cruise control
and relax. And I feel like that's why so many people are burnt out, is like, we feel like the second we like lose momentum, it's over, or we're going to be found out, or that imposter syndrome is going to prove that we were wrong for even trying. And I'm watching you in real time move your life, your business, your career, your relationships, and having to trust yourself that you will rebuild. And you'll not just rebuild, you'll rebuild better and more intentionally because of your experiences that have led you to this point. It's crazy.
Well, thank you. I appreciate you. And it's not easy. I just want to say that it's so not easy. And then I look at you, I'm like, I don't have any children. She just had 2 kids and she's jumping back at it. She's on this and on this. And I think, and the reason I'm being honest about this is because it's easy when you're in your coast, or when you're in your season of resting, recovering, and kind of like, I tell people I'm redesigning my life. Yeah. It's easy to look at your other friends online that are doing the most, 100, 110, 200, and feel like, oh my gosh, I'm not doing enough. And that's when you have to remind yourself of your season, and like your life does not have to look like anyone else's. What is your advice for people? Because I know it's not just me. I know a lot of people, like you said, have imposter syndrome, and they look, and even though they know, you can't help that feeling of feeling, oh my gosh, I need to start back. So what do you do in those times? I mean, that help you not jump back in it before you're ready.
I reverse engineer. So here's what I do. So I used to be a wedding photographer. That's how I got my start in entrepreneurship. Shot weddings all over the place. And I would fall down the rabbit hole of seeing someone else doing something and be like, oh, I want that life. Until I realized what went in to make that life happen. So here's an example. And maybe your audience can kind of think of something that they've seen that makes them feel this way. So I saw this photographer. She shot this gorgeous, gorgeous shoot in front of the Eiffel Tower at sunset. And I was like, oh my gosh, I would do anything to be the photographer. That is amazing. And then I thought, wait a second. She had to get a passport. She had to get on a plane, fly 14, 16, 18 hours. She had to change multiple time zones. She had to huff her gear through the airport. She had to take a cab in a city where she can't speak the language. She then had to wake up, haul that gear, shoot the photos, make sure all of the tourists were out of the way. Then she had to get her butt back home, edit all those photos, only to post that one little moment on Instagram. Am I willing to do that? No, that's not aligned with my version of success. I want to wake my kids up and put them to bed. I want to be home and have takeout sushi and watch The Bachelor with my husband. So what's fascinating to me is I have caught myself now, and I think envy can be a really strong driver in a beautiful way if you can harness that. But I also think that a lot of times when we check ourselves, when we see that envy sneaking in and we're like, am I willing to do that? Does that journey sound good? Does it sound like success? Would it feel like success for me? A lot of times our answer is no. And suddenly that thing that looked really shiny, that one moment when we dissect all of the moments that went into making it, we're like, I'm just not willing to do that. I think, I can see somebody with a 6-pack and I'm like, dang, that's awesome. And then I'm like, am I willing to do what it takes to get that? At this stage in my life, the answer is no. All right, good for her, not for me, as our friend Amy Poehler says.
I love that. And I think it's fine to have that inspiration, right? The inspiration of, if I ever want to invest that time, then maybe
it's possible.
Research what it takes. And like you said, with the photo, let me research that and really decide, is that what I want to do? Because a lot of times we see things and we're like, okay, I'm going to do it. And you jump right in, not knowing how much it takes, like you said, but looking at it, being inspired by it, and then asking yourself, am I willing to do what it would take? And is this the time for that? Yeah. And I think so many people with this, instant gratification, and really don't get the fact of it takes time to build something as incredible as yourself, as a baby, as your career, all the things. It really does take time, and it takes commitment, and it takes consistency. And like you said, everything that goes into it. And I think once people see that, and start to really say, okay, I'm inspired.
Yep.
Now, what is it going to take to get that? And now what you did in your book, which I highly suggest for everyone, is just ask the questions. In every single chapter, you had questions. And I want you to tell everyone your inspiration behind those questions, because I think it's brilliant and we align on this, and why we need to ask ourselves questions before we dive into pretty much anything.
Yeah. So I recognize this trend in women, and I first saw it in my own self. And you will love this as someone who is into yoga. I used to hate Shavasana. Like, I hated it because I could not, one, lay there by myself with my thoughts. I was afraid. I was afraid of what would come up. The second thing is I thought that I had to earn Shavasana. I had to earn that rest, right? Like, if I didn't do enough yoga or sweat enough or move in the right way or get that bind, I didn't earn the right to lay on the floor at the end. And it took me a long time to recognize that the work was not everything before Shavasana. The work was Shavasana itself. And that was where the real work, that was where like the fruits of your labor are just like sinking into your soul. And I used to just be so afraid of just laying there because my brain would start going, what do I need to go at the grocery store? What do I need to do today? What do I need? What do I need? What do I need? What do I need? What do I need to do? And I mean, think about it. Our generation can't even go to the bathroom without having your phone in your hand, right? Like, we literally cannot go pee because we are worried what is going to come up in those 30 seconds that I have to be with myself. We don't know how to be. And when I was thinking about the book and the message and everything, part of it is like feeling safe enough to lean in on a conversation like the one you and I are having and answer that question, how are you really? But the other part of that is like, how do I actually lean into myself and give myself the space to answer? Like, am I actually happy? And am I faking that I'm happy? And do I like my life? Am I in a good relationship? Am I in a good relationship with myself? Like, where am I at? And the questions and like prompts are really like these invitations to like do a soul Shavasana with yourself and come back home to answer those questions, and not just to answer them, but trust that you can answer them honestly and start to move forward. And when we talk about like your friend and like they have all this success and they have all these things, but they're not happy, I feel like there is this awakening. Like, people are leaving the workforce in droves. People are getting out of jobs, getting out of relationships, getting out of cities that are no longer serving them or never served them in the first place. And they're finally facing the fact that like, maybe I was faking that I enjoyed life. And there's nothing wrong with that, but like, how do we stop that? And I know for myself, like, learning how to rest and be takes just as much work and focus as going full steam ahead. In fact, going full steam ahead is like my go-to. Like, I'm an achiever. I love to do. Resting takes focus and intention from me. And I think that I'm not alone in that.
Yeah, I think you're absolutely right. And when you actually rest, I remember when I first started my yoga practice, feeling the same way you felt, like, oh, I'm thinking about all these things. And I had a really incredible yoga teacher, because she said, just allow it to come.
Yeah.
Just allow yourself. She didn't tell me how some teachers teach, just like, just shut your mind off. And, she's like, just allow it to keep coming, allow it to keep coming. Eventually, when you start to just listen to your breath, eventually it'll go away. Yeah. And I was just like, well, it took me months. Yeah. It wasn't weeks. It took me months and months and months. And now I realize that sometimes it's going to have a lot of chatter and sometimes you're going to have a little chatter. And I'm still been doing it for over 17 years. And I still lie down in Shavasana or get into meditation. I have a lot of chatter, but I've learned to get out of it quicker than I did when I started. And I think that is the most important part is realizing that you don't have to be perfect and you don't have to have it all together. And I think that you're a great example of just being honest about where you're at. And one thing that you said, which I also want to kind of get into a little bit, and is just feel your feelings, especially when it comes to like where you're at in the next season of life. Can you talk about how you now have learned to feel your feelings and how you allow those feelings to guide you in what you should do next?
So motherhood has been the biggest awakening. And let me tell you, I love motherhood, but man, my toddler gave me a run for my money last week, and it was mostly based around feelings. And what's fascinating to me in motherhood, in my experience, is that I often think about like, how can I raise empowered, like empathetic, emotionally intelligent children? And then I'm like, wait, how am I doing that myself? Like it is like a mirror being held up to me constantly. And for my daughter, she is a feeler. She is just a deep feeler. She is very in touch with her emotions. We talk a lot about feelings. Conversations are like, Mom, let's sit down and talk about my feelings. And I'm like, great. And it really woke me up to like, how was I taught about feelings by well-intentioned teachers, nonetheless, but how was I taught that like happiness is the goal? And, if you're sad, just get happy. And, it's like all of these things where it's like, my daughter, the other day, we were with some cousins and one of the cousins was having a hard time. And Coco was like, it's okay to be sad. Sad is a feeling. And like, it just made me like, think about like how the messaging so often is like, move through all the feelings so you can get back to happy. And it's like, but feelings are meant to be felt. Like they're signals, just like we were saying, like your check engine light is coming on through your body needing rest. Like our feelings are kind of like these check engine lights where if we pay attention to them and not try to rush them, we actually get a much fuller experience of life. And I think about time a lot because time is like my currency. Like I am in this place in life where I'm like, give me the fattest minutes that I can live. Like I want to just be like in the minutes. And the only way you can do that is by feeling your feelings. And the other day I was very frustrated and just frustrated with my daughter. And like we were both working through it. And I was like, I need her to see that I can get frustrated too. I need her to see me go through these feelings so that she knows that they're welcome. They can live here. They can be under this roof and be safe. And I think that a lot of our generation has been spent, and a lot of our time has been spent numbing our feelings or avoiding our feelings or just trying to redirect them to happiness. And while happiness is wonderful, and I wish we could all live in this like just state of happiness, I think our feelings, it's like without sadness, we don't know what joy feels like. And without fear, we don't know what safety feels like. And so it's like, if we want these full lives, we have to experience full feelings. And for a lot of us, it's uncomfortable to just sit in them.
Absolutely. And I think a lot of people feel like, well, I might lose my friend or lose my job if I express my feelings. Like, what do you have to say with that when people want to get, a little bit more open with their emotions or share how they're feeling?
Yeah. So I have learned in being in a marriage for over a decade that you don't want to say what someone else is doing wrong. You want to say how you are feeling. So for example, if Drew and I are arguing about something dumb, usually it's about washing dishes because he always washes my dishes because I'm not great at it. But like, I feel this way when instead of saying, when you do this, it makes me this way. It's like, I feel like when this happens, this is how it is impacting me. And I think that what's beautiful about feelings is no one can tell you you're not feeling something, right? So when we are leading arguments with actions or things that are setting us off, people can say, well, no, that wasn't my intent. Well, sometimes intention and impact are not aligned. And that's where we can really get in deep. And so I have learned the art of arguing with, I feel this way when this happens, and no one can tell me I don't feel this way. And so when it comes to like workplace settings or careers or even friendships, I think it's really beautiful to be honest in saying, you know, this is how I'm feeling. And take it or leave it, or take it for what you think it is. But I just want you to know that this is where I'm at. And I think what's beautiful is that when we get really honest with our feelings, not just with others, but with ourselves, it really kind of becomes this mental process of checking in with ourselves, which is something that we haven't done. I don't know. Do you have an Apple Watch ever, Koya, or do you wear one?
I don't.
Okay. So good for you, because sometimes it freaks me out when I think about like Bluetooth.
No,
stuff. But every once in a while my watch will go off and it'll like remind me to breathe. Mm-hmm. And like, have you ever had a moment or like where someone's like, just like unclench your jaw or like loosen your shoulders, and you're like, I didn't even realize I was doing that. I feel like when we do these check-ins with ourselves, it's like a body scan where you're like, whoa, I have not even like, my shoulders are up to my ears and I didn't even realize that. And it feels like that exhale. And I feel like when we check in with ourselves and say, how am I really feeling? It's almost like that unclenching of the jaw that you didn't even realize was clenched.
100%. I love that. And I think, you know, one thing I tell people to do is like in my phone every day, I have 2 questions. I ask, how do you feel? And what do you need? Those 2 questions, they just really, because so many times for me, it's like, I don't breathe deeply. Like I'm breathing, but just taking a deep breath helps me relax. Like you said, unclenching of the jaw, all those things. I think those are such great tips. I feel like you've given us so many yummy tools. So now I kind of want to get into your personal life a little bit. What has been, you feel, the most impactful thing that you started to do within the last 3 months that's really moved the needle in your life?
So I have been on this mission in terms of my health. Coming out of pregnancy and postpartum, I chose the word of the year, vibrant. And I was like, I want to be the most vibrant, energized version of myself. And that requires a lot of work, right? Like that doesn't just happen. And so I've had this just like beautiful health awakening for myself. And I've also gotten really good at asking for help when it comes to health. I've really coming out of having my second daughter. We are done having children. And so I feel like I'm entering a new season of my life where, you know, I've had 4 pregnancies over the span of 5 years. And I feel like I'm finally coming back to like, okay, my body is going to be mine again, in the sense of, you know, I'm not housing a human or trying to house a human or feeding a human. And so I have really been dialing in on health. So a few things that I've been doing, really trying to wake up slower. So I feel like my brain just like turns on and I'm like ready to go, but trying to just wake up slower, like lay in bed for 5 more minutes and just take some deep breaths and have some gratitude and kind of like slow down the practice of mourning, which is a lot when you have baby monitors and children waiting for you. But just kind of being a little bit more intentioned when my feet hit the floor, like I am here in my life. This is where I am. Taking supplements that my body needs to support that. I used to be terrible at taking vitamins and stuff and so now I have an ice cube tray where I put my supplements and it sits right next to my coffee maker. So I just take my supplements and it's right there. It's open in front of my eyeballs. So habit stacking in ways that support that. And then just honoring the movement of my body. I've kind of shared that I'm an achiever and I used to be like the most grueling, hard workouts. Those were the workouts. And now I'm like, do I need to lay on the floor and breathe? Do I need to stretch? Do I need to just go on a walk? What does that look like and how can it fit into my life? And so kind of honoring the different season that I find myself in and what that looks like in a way that leads to me feeling vibrant.
I love that. I really want to really dive in on that last one too, because I as well was an athlete, hardcore workouts, hit the gym. And even in yoga, like I start off with Ashtanga, and those are, and I would go hard at it. Yep. And what I realized as I, got into business and business started picking up is that a lot of inflammation is caused by those hard workouts. Mm-hmm. And even though your body might be getting in better shape, you're also putting more stress on your body when you already have stress. And I don't think I've ever mentioned this in the podcast, but how important it is to do exactly what you just said. Yeah. Some days just relax. Some days just do yoga, and then really balance out those hardcore workouts, because you could be doing yourself a disservice by really hitting it hardcore every single day because it's stressing your body.
Yeah. When I went through my second loss, I started doing a bunch of blood work because I was just determined I needed answers at that point. And my doctor, we did a cortisol test, and she goes, "What are you doing at like 9:30 in the morning?" And I used to do CrossFit 5 days a week, never missed a day. I was an intense athlete, and there's nothing wrong with CrossFit. It was the way that I was using CrossFit as this ability to compete with other people and myself. She was like, "Your cortisol is like through the roof, and then you just tank." And I was doing this super intense workout while I was going home and like falling asleep around lunchtime because my body couldn't support how that cortisol was fluctuating. And when you are an achiever, you're likely already working in a state of stress. Your adrenals are probably being stretched beyond their capacity. And so she was like, "I want to challenge you and like put on some music and go on a walk. Like start to like honor your movement." And that doesn't mean you can't work out hard, but understand what is happening within your body where it's like fight or flight mode. You can only stay in fight mode or flight mode for a small amount of time. You're not meant to live there. And so a lot of people are living there, whether it's through workouts or entrepreneurship or relationships, and they're staying in that constant state. And that's why I think we're getting to burnout. And so it might not be the workout for you. It might be the way you're eating or the relationships or the way that you're working, or you're constantly on and you're wired but tired. But like everything that we're doing impacts our body and our energy. And you teach about this all the time. Like your energy is everything.
100%. And whether it's good stress or bad stress, it's still stress. And it impacts the body the same. Like having a baby or buying a house, like all of that stuff is impacting the body. And so I hope everyone listening knows that, like, when you're having all this, it's great to have it all whenever you come upon it. But remember, balancing it out with small walks, like you said, massage, sleep, rest, and just a lot of self-care. I know, like, we both are just really realizing, especially later on in life, like how much self-care is necessary for us to truly thrive. Yes. And so we're going to kind of wrap it out with your favorite things to do as a mama for self-care in order to keep yourself at this high level of functioning.
Yeah. So the first one is this, and the idea of mom guilt is very real. At least I've experienced it. And I always was feeling like when I was mothering, I was thinking about work. And when I was working, I was thinking about mothering. And so I just started this intention of like literally planting my feet before I walked into a room and just really saying, like, just be all in. Whether it is playing with blocks on the floor or sitting down and recording a podcast, be all in so that you're not half in on everything. And that is self-care to me, where it's like, I can finish the day and be like, my time was spent where it needed to be spent in the best way. My roots are from Finland. And so we call it sauna, but sauna, the world calls it sauna. I say sauna, but we have a sauna, and like just sneaking 20 minutes in of just sitting and being quiet and still. I often play meditations while I sit in it and just like heat my body up and sweat it all out. That has been huge for me. And then reading before I go to bed. So like we have not had cell phones in our bedroom for years. It's just a hard and fast rule. We charge our phones in cabinets, like we make charging stations in cabinets in our home so that our phones and devices are out of sight. And we do not go to bed until they are in the cabinet. And so just like reading for fun, just for the sake of reading, has been a practice that I love, because if I read a business book at 10 o'clock at night, I'm not going to fall asleep. But when I read for fun, I think last year I read like 35 books for fun while writing my own book and being a mom and an entrepreneur. Reading for fun has just been a really great tool of self-care for me, and something that I think a lot of us have gotten away from.
Okay, we're going to need one of those 35 books that you read for fun. That's your favorite.
Oh my gosh. Okay. Let me think. So I love Daisy Jones and the Six. So Taylor Jenkins Reid is an incredible author. Daisy Jones and the Six, The Seven Husbands of Evelyn Hugo. Those are two of her books. So good. She's like amazing. Malibu Rising is another one of hers. I've read every single book of hers. Like when I find someone I love, I'm like, yes. I started a book club with my mom and sister and a few friends. And so we've been going through, everyone picks a different book each month. So that's been fun. But of course, this month, I think everyone should read my book. Let's get back into
I 100% agree. How are you really, y'all? When I tell you it's such a fun read, I cannot wait because I want to listen to your voice on Audible. Yes. So I'm definitely going to get on Audible too. But I'm so grateful that I was able to get like a pre-copy and just really dive in, because it's just so good. It's just good for the soul just to have those just really simple. Like, I just love how you break everything down in the book to be so simple, to be so practical, to be so easy to understand. So thank you for producing this book. How are you really? And can you let everyone know where they can find it and where they can learn more about you?
Yes, of course. So you can learn more about me at jennakutcher.com, spelt like Ashton Kutcher. Unfortunately, we are not related. And you can pick up the book anywhere books are sold, or go to howareyourreallybook.com. That's howareyourreallybook.com. And Koya, thank you for your friendship and just being in my scope of influence. I catch your growth day trainings every month. And I love just being in your world. You and your check-ins mean a lot to me. So I love you.
Thank you, Jenna. I love you too. Your check-ins have kept me alive. Your sisterhood, just being able to call you, to talk to you, to hear from you, and just be inspired by you. Online and offline has been such a blessing to my life. And now my entire community gets to enjoy why I'm so obsessed with you and why I love you. So, and I am still your time genius accountability partner.
Right.
I'm
always
so happy for that program by our mutual friend, Marie Folio. It's really helped me simplify, and I'm really using it to simplify my life. I didn't know how hard it was going to be. I'm like, ooh.
I know. It's complicated to simplify.
It's complicated to simplify. Us multi-passionate people, but it is possible. And I've already been seeing the benefits of just allowing myself that space to ask myself, how am I doing? Yeah. How can I slow down, and how can I simplify to amplify? And I think the beauty of what you share in your book is just like how, when you really ask yourself the questions, you really find your own unique answer. And that's what's beautiful, that we all are not just trying to follow the path of every single person on Instagram, but that we ask ourselves the personal questions and we find our own unique divine path.
I love you.
I love you. Thank you so very much for your time and your love. And thank you all for listening to us. If you haven't already, please leave a review. Let us know what you loved about this episode. Tag us on Instagram. Let us know your biggest takeaways. Give Jenna some love. Give her a shout out. And until next time, love yourself, love others, and love the world one day at a time, one breath at a time. Peace and love.
I just want to take a moment to say thank you for being part of the Get Loved Up community. I like to share topics and people making a positive impact in the world, and your feedback means the world to me. If you haven't already left a review, please leave a 5-star review and let me know what you want to hear more of on the show. I'm here for you, and together we're making the world a better place, one day at a time, one show at a time. Thank you for listening.